So, as we all know, Chris Paul rejoined the Clippers back in July to basically end his career. He didn't announce it at the time, but going into the season, we all knew that Chris Paul this was going to be his last season. And sure enough, shortly thereafter, Chris Paul announced that this would indeed be his final season in the NBA. And what a feel-good story it is, right? Chris Paul, a legendary player, has played on many teams, but, most famously has been an LA Clipper for what 7 or 8 years. He was a Clipper, and is basically in my opinion, the greatest Clipper of all time. You can't deny that. Yeah, you have Blake Griffin and maybe Elton Brand and some other players that you can think of, but it's Chris Paul. Chris Paul, when he was traded to the Los Angeles Clippers back in 2011, after he was stolen away from my Los Angeles Lakers by David Stern, nixing the trade that was going to send him to the Lakers and continue Kobe Bryant's reign of terror for collecting championship rings. The Clippers, they got him, and he turned their franchise around. Obviously, the Clippers were a disaster of a team for many, many decades before that. They had only made the playoffs maybe one time in maybe 15 or 16 years, something like that. But they were an absolute train wreck. Obviously, Donald Sterling was the owner. He has been disgraced from the NBA ever since 2014 when he got caught on a recording saying racial stuff about black people and Magic Johnson. And we don't have to get into any of that. But the Clippers were a disaster of a franchise. Chris Paul comes, changes it. Lob City with Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and they're an annual playoff team after that. Had championship aspirations, didn't work out for a number of reasons, whether it was injury or this, that, or the other. Things didn't work out from his era with the Clippers. They had a lot of great moments together, but they didn't win a championship. But that's okay because he turned that franchise around. They were able to become a valuable franchise from what they were in the past under Donald Sterling. Steve Ballmer comes. They turn things around with the Lob City era, and they're not looked at upon anybody's eyes anymore as the runs of the NBA. In fact, for years they were up among the top of the Western Conference in many, many points. So then in 2017, his time ends with the LA Clippers, gets traded to the Houston Rockets, and then thereafter, he goes to the Phoenix Suns, goes to the NBA Finals, but just never able to win an NBA championship. And that's kind of been the story of his career. Hall of Fame player, great player, but just never able to win a title. And you know what? That's okay because he is a Hall of Fame player. It's not indicative of who he is as a player. It's just a matter of bad luck. You had guys like Charles Barkley, Allen Iverson. The list goes on and on. Steve Nash, of guys that were Hall of Fame players but could not win an NBA championship. And that's okay. But he comes back to the LA Clippers. I think, what is this, his 20th season? This is a storybook ending as you could get, as much of a storybook ending as you can get, and this was perfect for him to end his career as an LA Clipper. And it's what fans and everyone around the NBA wanted to see. Because if he wasn't winning an NBA championship, at least he can end his career as an LA Clipper, where people were going to remember him the most. Now, obviously, the Clippers were not going to be in contention this year. Look at the way their roster was constructed. A bunch of aging veterans, guys that do not mesh well together. Kawhi Leonard, they had begun the season in controversy with the Kawhi Leonard stuff and aspiration and everything that got reported by Pablo Torre and his investigation before the season started for the LA Clippers. It was embarrassing for the Clippers to start their season with controversy like that, and the jury's still out on what the ramifications of all of that's going to be in terms of them circumventing the cap, essentially trying to pay Kawhi Leonard under the table. We don't know what the ramifications still are going to be of that, but it is never, ever a good thing for a franchise to start their season with controversy like that. That's a black eye, a bruise under the Clippers name. And I think, that was just an omen in itself to start the season. And let alone, look, you got guys like Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, Bradley Beal, and then you had Chris Paul and some of the other guys that are there, and it just didn't seem like it was something that was going to work. Obviously, it has not worked. They're 5-16 on the season, with one of the worst teams in the NBA in total, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better despite having a victory last night in Atlanta. But the Clippers are a train wreck, and it was very indicative since the start that this season was not going to be well for them, and it's shown. 5-16, not great. There's been a lot of things going on within the locker room that is not great. And Paul, being an outspoken person himself, during the years before when he was with the LA Clippers, there was a lot of times when teammates had a lot of friction with him because he definitely held teammates accountable in certain ways where it was uncomfortable for guys. But that was just his leadership style. He held teammates accountable for their lack of play, their lack of willingness to work hard, and that was the type of leadership that Chris Paul implemented every team he went to, and especially when he was with the Clippers. I know for a fact it rubbed DeAndre Jordan the wrong way, and many other guys. I think it was Blake Griffin as well. Just at times where he felt like he needed to get the best out of them, and if he felt like you were just kind of like lackadaisical about things, he was going to speak up. It's been well documented at points. That's what Chris Paul does. And I think, going based off of what Lou Williams said in another podcast or on a show, we can talk about that. That's what Chris Paul was doing. Now, on the Run It Back show on YouTube, former Clipper Lou Williams, he had an extensive career in the NBA, played a few seasons with the LA Clippers, but he was Chris Paul's former teammate, and he shared some insight into what he has heard into what led into the decision for the Clippers releasing Chris Paul. He said, "From what I've gathered, there are a few scenarios in which CP was holding people accountable, from players to staff, from coaching staff up to the front office. He even addressed the team and apologized and said, 'Look, my criticisms are coming from a good place. I want us to be good. I want us to get this thing right.' And he says he was just holding guys accountable." He also went on to say in another statement, "There was another scenario where he was critical of the front office as well. I think that was the one that broke the camel's back. That was the straw that broke the camel's back when he had some criticisms for the front office as well. I think that's what brought this to a head in the early hours." All right, so think about that. Chris Paul, a future Hall of Fame point guard, is speaking up on what he thinks is what's going wrong with the franchise. Obviously, at that time, they're 4-16 or whatever their record is. Things are horrible at that point. So that's what a veteran leader is supposed to do in that locker room. He's supposed to hold guys accountable. And if your veteran leader, a guy that's a future Hall of Famer, is on the roster and is not speaking up, what does that show you about that person? But that's Chris Paul in himself. He is speaking up. He is speaking up in terms of to what he thinks is going wrong, and he's going to hold not only himself but other people, the front office, coaching staff accountable for what's going on. As the big fish here in the pond is Steve Ballmer. Ballmer takes direct responsibility for letting this happen. Ballmer is the owner of the Clippers. Ballmer makes all the decisions in terms of what needs for the Clippers to be successful. And I will put this all on Ballmer for the aspiration stuff that happened at the beginning of the season, and for them, for their investigations, and then them finding out they're circumventing the salary cap. That is solely on Steve Ballmer, and Ballmer allowing for Lawrence Frank to construct this roster together. That is solely on Ballmer. Ballmer needs to be held accountable as well. He does not walk away scot-free, and I think it time and time again is proving that Ballmer needs to be held accountable for the disaster in which the Clippers are turning out to be. Now, obviously, it's never going to be a disaster in which Donald Sterling had. That's a completely different issue. What I'm saying here is that the Clippers are not well right now. They're not well, and they don't. Honestly, I don't think they have any hope to be well in the future. Ballmer let a future Hall of Fame point guard be dismissed in the fashion that he has. Ballmer should be on his knees kissing the feet of Chris Paul for bringing relevancy back to the Clippers a decade ago. Okay? That's what Ballmer needs to have been doing. He needs to retire Chris Paul's jersey as the first ever retiree in Clippers history at the whatever you want to call it, the Intuit Dome, and retire his jersey number 3. It needed to be displayed in front of everyone, in front of Clippers Nation, to celebrate the man. And instead, you're kicking his ass out the door and saying, "Don't let the door hit you from behind." That's what you're saying. That's the type of environment that you're allowing to have had. That's an embarrassing thing for the Clippers to do. It's an embarrassment. There's no way around it. It's an embarrassment for Steve Ballmer. It's an embarrassment for the Clippers franchise, and it's an embarrassment for the Clippers fans. And Clippers fans, I know I hate on you guys sometimes because me being a Lakers fan, I think of the Clippers as little brothers, and they will always be little brothers in my opinion. But you know what? You guys deserve better than that, at least. And you know what? The Clippers, they need to start holding Ballmer. Needs to start holding people accountable for bad decisions, and including himself. Because this isn't the first time that Ballmer has done a not so great job at rewarding future Hall of Fame players and at least legacy players in itself. Need we remind you of what happened with Blake Griffin after Blake Griffin signed an extension with the Clippers in 2017? Ballmer said, "I want you to be the first Clipper ever to have your jersey retired, and I want it to be at the Staples Center's rafters and all that." He wanted Blake Griffin. He got on his knees and said, "Blake, I want you to be a legacy player with the Clippers." And what happens when 5 months later he trades him to the Detroit Pistons? Like, that happened out of nowhere. And it was very shocking. Like, what happened there? This is not the first time that Ballmer has done a job like this, and it's I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say and what his logic is for coming up with decisions treating legacy players like this, but it's not good. It's not good. Now, here's what I think is going to happen going forward. It's going to be a yard sale now. Kawhi Leonard, yard sale. Take him for whatever we can get. James Harden, yard sale. Take him for whatever we can get. They're going to start putting a lot of guys on the market, and it's going to be a Black Friday sale in which you can grab all these guys and just turn them loose into the market, and they're going to start fresh. That's what I think is going to happen. I think that's what I hope happens for the Clippers, because that's what needs to happen for the Clippers. Start just trying to trade away whatever you can right now, bring in as much assets as possible in order to start to get this franchise back on its feet. Now, as far as CP3 goes, look, I think he's going to land on a team somewhere into the mid part of the season. I don't think this is the last we've seen of Chris Paul. I think a team like Oklahoma City or anybody that's going to be a contending NBA team will probably try to give him a look if they have a roster spot available and it's a need for a ball handling point guard. I think they're going to give him a look. I don't think this is the last we've seen of Chris Paul. I could definitely see Oklahoma City. That would be great if Chris Paul could re-sign with Oklahoma City, a team he's played with before, and has legacy back when he was a Hornet in Oklahoma City. I think that would be great, and that would give him a shot to win an NBA championship. Another team I'd like to see him go to is San Antonio. He just previously played there, I think before the Clippers, and so I think that'd be another shot for him just to at least be in the playoffs again, and hopefully we can see that happen. What I don't want to see him do is become a Laker. I don't think there's any need for him to be a Laker at this point. I think that ship has sailed. It's been far gone. We don't need any ball handlers at this point. We need players that can play defense. We need players that are versatile. And Chris Paul is not any of that. No disrespect to Chris Paul, but he's none of that. So, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, I think would be great for him. But yeah, hopefully he does land on a team going forward.